to the Creativity, Thinking, and Education podcast with your host, Patricia Rose Upsack. Today we will be talking to the amazing and remarkable Dr. Polly Palmer about education in all of its different aspects. She is so fascinating and wonderful and a joy to talk to.
So that then they become excited about what it is that you're teaching them how to do, or that you're empowering them to learn how to do. So really, I always loved being a teacher. I came from a teaching family. I enjoyed working hard for 9 to 10 months out of the year, and then having 2 to 3 months off to be somebody else, do something else, kind of renew what interested me and that sort of thing. So for many reasons, I always wanted to be a teacher, and I was lucky enough to be able to do it for a very, very long time.
Oh, well, it sounds fascinating. And because I also was in the same school with you for part of your educational experience, I can clearly say that you were one of the best teachers I've ever seen in my life, because you taught the child. I mean, you literally looked at them as individuals and found a way to match their style with what you were trying to teach them. And I found that, a very, very important skill. Okay.
That was very kind. And the thing is that's another part of education that I think has kept me interested all these years. I'm doing it for selfish reasons, because it is so exciting to connect with the students. I mean, when a person is teaching a high school class and you have like 5 classes and 5 days a week and 25 to 30 kids per class, I mean, the idea of connecting with each one individually is pretty awesome. And yet watching that connection happen and doing what I call the dance, of give and take and sort of perceiving what lights that child's fire and using the stick and the carrot and all kinds of techniques that I learned from other teachers is the part that was and still is exciting for me. I just find it lots of fun, and let's face it, if the teacher's happy, the students are happy, I believe.
Yes, that's true. The name of my website. Happy
that's
teachers,
right.
happy students. Okay,
moving
right along. What techniques have you used to empower your students?
One of the greatest things that I think can empower a student is to help them learn to recognize when they know what they know. And it isn't about stuffing them full of facts and then great they
spit them back out at you.
Spit them back out. Yeah, I wanted to say stuff and spew, but of course I couldn't say that. But anyway, that's just not where it's at. But to know that there are ways to allow them to choose their own subjects to write about, to decide on projects that are interesting, and to pursue questions that are intriguing for them, that is where you can work the content in around whatever it is that you're supposed to be teaching, that the curriculum says that you're supposed to be teaching.
Right.
And I know that when I was at the high school level, I was lucky enough to be able to have an assignment that the students would do where they would write in a journal, and they could write anything they wanted to, but the journal was due on Friday. They did this outside of class. If the journal was due on Friday and they were done, they were free. So there was a big incentive. And I was lucky enough to be in a high school where that was allowed, where a student who was dismissed from class wasn't considered some kind of criminal,
Right.
I mean, they were free, and they could, stay in class, take a nap if they wished, or they could go outside because it was a beautiful campus. But, the way of connecting with students sometimes is just simply to say, write anything you want to. If you're going to write about suicide or hurting somebody else, I'm going to have to see if I can contact your counselor. But other than that, write about anything you want to. Write about if you wanted to, write your name if you want to over and over again. I don't care, right?
Right, because one of the things I loved that technique of yours actually because you had a lot of my resource room students, and I was thrilled because the reality is that you know that old adage that you can take a horse to water but you can't make them drink. Well, one of the things that you used to do in your English classes with and not just in your basic English but even in your the college comp classes that you taught, I loved that you always had a journal going, and that the whole point of writing that you couldn't actually tell them, but that what they started to discover for themselves was just like reading, the more you write, the better it gets. And pretty soon, and if you had said you will turn in a journal and you will write such and such and you'll turn it in on Fridays, half of my students would not have turned in the journal, and more than likely they wouldn't have shown up on Fridays. But because you didn't tell them that they had to write a certain thing, and you didn't tell them that everything had to be spelled perfectly, and that you pointed it out, said it would be nice if this was spelled right, be nice if it was a complete sentence, things like that. But you didn't penalize them in the journal. So they got to the point where they started actually really telling you a lot of things. When they were writing daily, things would start to come out, and they would start to kind of build on that. And invariably, because you were, and I was lucky enough that you had them for an entire year because, they had it 2 semesters when they took basic English with you, I was always so thrilled to see that it got to the point where they always showed up, gave you the journal, you checked it off because they turned it in, and then they, quote unquote, were free for the rest of the period. And, it really did build in some skills that I saw transfer into other classes. It started to help them lose their fear of pen and paper. It's, all those words that they have for fear of paper and fear of writing and fear of libraries. Well, I had a lot of students who they used to tell me that they were afraid of books.
Really, and you just wonder at what point did the school disempower them to tamp down on whatever their natural gifts are, and that is something that that they have educated me about over the years, over and over again, especially with students who come to us with labels, labels like ADD or ADHD or they're on the Asperger's spectrum or all of those labels, and they are an amazing teachers. And the ability to water and fertilize and care for those gifts that those students have has been just an intriguing, interesting, exciting part of education. And that's why I was always drawn to having students integrated into the classroom or teaching classes that were kind of geared toward people who didn't quite, make it into the, quote, regular class. That was what I taught at the university level overseas. And the course that I loved to teach the most was the 001 class, Writing 001 at the American University of Sharjah over in the United Arab Emirates, where I was for 7 years. And the students would come into class going like, what the heck? What am I doing in here? And they were brilliant in math, in science, other things, and they would write like, a half a page of scrawled text, and then whoever was judging them would say, well, you belong in 001, and they're, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here?
Because, the students that I had, and I always found this fascinating. They had IQs of something like 5 to 15 points higher than the average IQ of the kids in
Absolutely.
high school. And the kids at Fairview High School had high IQs because they came from all these think tanks around Boulder. I mean, in terms of their parents worked at NCAR or the University of Colorado or IBM. I mean, all of those places. And so education was actually a very big deal to their families. And these kids would come in so bright and so creative. But the part that really did upset me, I mean, not that they were creative, because they oftentimes use that creativity to get out of doing work or getting into trouble. But
Absolutely.
But the thing that bothered me was that there was also often a very low self-concept, because if they really were smart like I thought they were, then they would be able to do everything across the board equally well. They couldn't trust themselves because they would end up having, they had a lot of peaks and valleys. I mean, and the math department would get so mad at me if they saw that some kid that was one of the smartest kids they had in their department being helped in English, because they say, this kid doesn't need any help. He is so smart. What are you doing? They didn't understand the whole idea of that just because you're really smart in one thing doesn't mean that you're necessarily really smart in something else. But it also doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And
Absolutely.
That the only place that we actually judge that is in the school system. I mean, when you're out in the world, it's if you're a computer tech person.
And it's math and science. It's math and, not math and science, but math and language arts. And I know that Gardner's 7 or 8 different kinds of intelligences is just one of the most wonderful books that I think anybody who's going into education should be part of their curriculum. But
Howard Gardner,
and again, it's just like I was watching a movie that Robert Redford's son did, and it was about dyslexia, because his son has dyslexia, and one of the experts said it was a survival mechanism for human beings. The spatial ability and some of the other wonderful abilities that people who had dyslexia, that we label as having dyslexia, were actually survival skills, and obviously the humans selected for that trait. And it wasn't until reading and writing became the survival standard in education that folks who didn't necessarily have a strong skill in that area, then were, kind of shunted aside and labeled as lazy. And that just kills me. We did this. I was in
lazy. Like I said, they were very good at being very creative around figuring out.
And working 10 times harder than everybody else to try to make sense of what it was that they were presented with.
Oh, I know. Years ago, I had a student who, and he was so bright, and he was this amazing artist, and he was really frustrated, and I was trying to help him learn to read, because that was one of my skills, is I was really good at teaching kids how to read. And he looked at me, and he didn't have tears in his eyes, but he was really close. And he said, if the words would just stop moving off the page, I could do this.
Yes.
And I was just stunned.
Yes.
And the thing is because I'd been involved in the pilot program between UCLA and San Diego State University for learning disabilities, I had a lot of really good teachers. And so I went and pulled out some of the things I had, some of the techniques that you can use to basically put borders around things and stop the words from moving. They never said that the words moved off the page like this kid did, but they did say that sometimes the words would move around or get wiggly,
Absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? Or like there are people who see words in dots, kind of like a Monet or an impressionistic painting.
Absolutely.
Which is just fascinating.
The whole world scintillating, absolutely.
Yeah,
or seeing all the tops of the letters cut off. Do you know? I was reading an article about a different font that has been developed that is extreme. It anchors words for people who have dyslexia. And I'll look it up, and maybe you can put it on your website. But it's a different kind of font, and I noticed that it has little curvies and has narrowing and widening of the curves of letters. I'm really into fonts also. And I took a course actually at my university taught by the lady who runs our disabilities, empowerment kind of center. And she said, whatever you do, don't use Times New Roman, which of course is what the standard is for everything. She had used something like Calibri, which has no serifs. It's just a straight curve. But this other font had shading, not shadings exactly, but it had widening and narrowing of the different curves and so forth and so on. And they said that people who are dyslexic said, oh, yay, it's wonderful. Plus, I've also heard that it's easier to do all kinds of reading on a Kindle or a Nook because you can make the print larger and you can change the background color. And somehow or another, that makes a difference. And,
it does.
For whatever. Here I am talking again about things that are, kind of like just I'm plucking things out of the air, but I continue to
exactly
to
what
be,
I was hoping you would do.
Yeah, I continue to be gathering information that I like to be able to pass along to people and hopefully make a difference. And I know that one of the greatest things about empowering students is to have, like you talked a little bit about students being afraid of research. Well, at the university where I taught for so many years, the course that they have to take, 204, taught by the English department, it's like the killer course. I mean, the people who teach it are supposed to be, get on their evil masks every day and scare the bejeebers out of the students. And I'm like, that's stupid. I want them to love research. I don't want them to be afraid of it. And so everybody
you want to
had
give them the skills to be able to go look up whatever they want.
And so, rather than having them do all these like strange kinds of, research and group projects and all that stuff, it was like the whole course that I taught basically started with, let's find a topic that lights your fire. I don't care what it is. And so that took a while. It took 2 or 3 weeks of learning how to choose a topic that's researchable and that's authentic and one that lights their fire. And then I got I learned so much. And that's, of course, the other aspect of teaching that I love, which I mentioned before, which is the selfish aspect. I'm a knowledge junkie, and I learn about using biomass to, clean up oil spills, and I learned about, empowering techniques for HR, from a business major, and all about the system of so-called democracy and how it's failing in Pakistan and on and on and on. And
well,
the
thing I do think, I have to say, is I do think that there really is a good place for kids having to work in a group or, in a team, because one of the things that I really did try to get them to do is, interestingly enough, many of the students I worked with were very independent, individualistic leader types, and they weren't actually very good at working in a group. And so I would have to find ways to help them work with other people, because it is a skill that for whatever reason a lot of them did not come by naturally. So, but I hear exactly what you're saying. So let's move on to our next question.
Because I wanted to piggyback on what you said. When I taught at North Central High School in Indianapolis, we had students for a 9-week course of core abilities, and then they went on into their choice of electives. Well, what we taught them was the different roles in a group. How do you function in a group? How does group process work? And how do successful groups operate? And my daughter, who, again, she's 28 years old, and she's been teaching at university and other places, and she said the other day, I really hate group work, but you know why? Because they never taught us how to do it. And I go, oh, hello, yeah, I get it. Okay, absolutely. But I have to piggyback again for the third time. Many times, if doing group work is part of the curriculum, so forth and so on, I will tend to put all the, quote, slackers together. Why? because they rise to the occasion. And it's pretty hilarious to watch. Anyway, moving right along.
Right. Well, I was going to say that did remind me of one of my favorite group activities is Edward de Bono's Six Thinking Hats.
Yes.
You know, it's
yes.
I love that technique teaches people, not even just kids, but you know, college kids and people in business. You know, where that they learn that people that it's not about being right and wrong, that it's about there are different perspectives, and learning to honor those perspectives as opposed to saying, well, no, he's just a jerk because he doesn't think the way I do or whatever.
Yes.
You know, I think that's really an outdated notion that kids need to learn if we're going to have a positive world. But anyway.
And again, I want to piggyback on that by saying I also use the words being an allowance of or without judgment. And I'm constantly, I have been for over a year working on myself to say when I judge something or I determine something, I'll say, interesting point of view. I have that point of view. Or teaching students when they hear something and they, you know, kind of react to it or close down or whatever, just in their mind, just simply say, interesting point of view, and then kind of breathe and let it go. Because, as you said, when you are wearing those different hats and you are approaching the solution to a problem from a certain perspective, it really does just shift that old paradigm of there's, you know, one right way for everything. And does definitely connect us to the fact that, thank heaven, we don't all think alike, and thank heaven we don't all have the
diversity
same
is wonderful.
We would be really fighting each other for the same few jobs, you know. And that's another point of empowering, is when students can say, hey, I am not like everybody else. I am X, Y, and Z, and they really know who they are, and they can kind of vibrate on that frequency. The happiness, the joy that they bring to whatever they're doing is just unstoppable. And, hey, does the world need more of that? Oh, yes, I think it does.
It does.
Interesting point of view. I have that point of view.
Okay. All right. So our next question is, if you could see one change in education in the world, what would that be? Just one.
It's one, but it's a long one. That teachers are thoroughly trained how to be inspirational and effective by given specific strategies for reaching and inspiring their students and be rewarded with a salary commensurate with their professional skills. Hey, how does it get any better than this? What else is possible? No, that's what I would say.
Right, because I think it is true that, you know, through over the last 10 years, I think for whatever reason, and there's a lot of different things that play into it politically, economically, teachers have been penalized for having a broad point of view or trying to, you know, really teach children. Teachers are so important to me, and you know, we'll get into that later. But the thing is that, you know, almost every really successful person that you meet, if you ask them, was there anybody in your educational world that you remember, and almost always they can come up with one or two teachers right off the bat that made them feel like they made a difference, that they could be, you know, whatever they wanted to be. And people poo-poo that, but I think it's really important. I think that, you know, teachers spend more time with kids, especially in elementary school, than almost their parents do, because their parents end up, you know, getting home after work. The kids, they have to have dinner, and then they have to do their homework, and then they go to bed. You know, and so the person who actually is interacting with these children the most is the person at school, and so they're really, really important. And so I think that we have to find a way to help teachers understand how powerful and how valuable they are, and help empower them, because they in turn then will empower the children, and then the children will grow up to be stable human beings, and we will all be so happy about that. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, somebody once said over in the UAE, one of my friends, they said, if you pay your teachers peanuts, you get monkeys.
Okay. They are not monkeys, but we will not go.
I mean, they pay some teachers the equivalent of $600 a month. Rent
that's awful.
is $3,000 a month. I mean, I'm serious. And they're always saying, gee, where can we get teachers? Where can we get teachers? Well, hello. I'm sorry. It's so different from, like, places like Finland and so forth and so on. And I am happy that, at least in the school systems I was in, and I think this is true to that grade school teachers and kindergarten teachers are paid the same as somebody, in high school who has a master's, Right. So, I mean, I'm thinking, wow, that is just fantastic,
Right.
because there is no place at which you can have a cutoff that says, hey, these years of education are more important than any other years. No, not at all. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other part of that is, I spent most of my teaching career teaching in high school, but I did spend the first 2 years as a sub in elementary schools, and I do want to tell the whole world, including university professors, that elementary school teachers work really hard.
Really hard.
Really hard.
And buy their own materials and all kinds of stuff.
Well, it's just,
supplies and stuff. Oh my gosh.
The kids are sponges, and they're waiting to see what is out there, and so if they're surrounded by negativity all the time, then they take that in, just like everything else. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So now, what is your opinion of Sir Kenneth Robinson?
I think he has really found his niche, and I'm hoping that his conversations have become a part of some of the schools of education across the nation, because although he seems to, he delivers his message of wake up education, you're doing it wrong, in such a humorous way with that delightful British accent. I would just follow anybody anywhere with a British accent. He just says, hello, you're totally messed up. And I'm gone there. Yes, you bet, I believe it. He really does have a serious message, and he does reach a vast audience.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about his message?
Absolutely. He pretty much says that we are not going to reach our goal of universal education, whether it be in the United States or worldwide, by testing the students to death. That isn't where it's going to happen at all. He values the art of education, drawing forth from the students instead of stuffing them with information. And I first encountered his ideas, obviously not in education classes, but it was when I was researching the Finnish education system, because I was giving a talk at a conference, in Chicago last year, 2 years ago. And he talked about the fact that there is early intervention, not a pull-out where you go, special needs kid here, big S on their forehead, out they go. No. It's like you empower the teachers to be aware, to notice when a student is struggling in a certain area. And then there is a team, and this is in the Finnish education system, there's a team that meets to see what kind of interventions would be appropriate, working with the family. And so, people have an idea about the Finnish education system that it's pretty much homogenized. That there's a homogeneous population of Finnish students who all look like people who herd reindeer up in Lapland. No. There are a lot of immigrants that have been accepted into Finland from horrible, situations in countries like Somalia.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, and they come into the system, and they have to learn Finnish because that is what the education is delivered into. And there are transition programs, and, they notice that the student is falling behind in math, and, oh, my goodness, they have, let's do math. Let's go put on our warm clothes and go out to the forest that's right beyond the school, and let's measure some trees, and let's do some practical things that, make some sense kinesthetically. And again, reaching, and I did learn this in a class on universal design. This was taught by, again, that wonderful lady at the American University of Sharjah, where she talked about, if you teach, if you organize your classroom, if you arrange it, if you're lucky enough to have a classroom, and you can arrange it in a way that meets needs of kinesthetic, visual, and auditory learners, you're going to be reaching everybody. You don't have to think of yourself as reaching just the kids with some special needs or special abilities. No. It's like if you are presenting things in all those different modes, and you're doing individual work, and you're doing group work, and you're doing all of these different modes, then however the child has come in wired, they're going to be able to succeed in that realm. And it just seems so humane that early on you spend the time and the effort working with students in ways that are supportive and that are working. If there's trauma that's been going on, there are people who are on that team who are gifted and kind and can work with that and work with the families, and hello.
He
yes.
talks a lot about the Finnish school system. Then is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, he talks a lot about the Finnish school system and the fact that they only really do one major test, and that's the one test that is normed worldwide, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's the one that ranks the Finnish students in those classic math and science thingies way, way up there, 6th in the world, 3rd in the world. And this is without all of the testing, check mark, student has achieved X, Y, and Z. And their system is really quite amazing. I mean, people will take courses and visit Finland and do workshops and visit schools and do all kinds of things in order to learn what they're doing. And interestingly enough, they're not riding on their laurels, because I was just reading an article within the last 6 months about how they decided to shift over from, now this would be like in high school, well, maybe not, maybe earlier, shift over from discipline-based courses like math, science, English, to more project-oriented. And I keep thinking of our wonderful teammates, Russ Krupp and Paula Harris, who started the option program in Fairview High School.
Right.
And all of those skills can go together, and those students, I mean, one student did a practicum in Antarctica. I mean, how cool is that as a high school student in the 80s? And, or did a mentorship with a jazz musician, or, all of that stuff. And thank heavens. And also the Finnish school system is not geared math, science, English, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's not just a one-way ticket down that road. It is the whole child. You develop the whole person by allowing them to have experiences in music and art that are affirming and supportive and joyful.
Thank you for listening to our wonderful podcast with Dr. Polly Palmer. If you would like to see more of Dr. Polly Palmer, please go to happyteachers.happystudents.com and watch the short video clip of Dr. Edward de Bono's 6 Thinking Hats, of which she is part. Thank you for joining me here at the Creativity, Thinking, and Education Podcast. Please visit us at happyteachers.happystudents.com. If you find value in this podcast and the message we're trying to share and spread, then please click the subscribe button and give my show a review, hopefully a good one. I am so excited to be able to share the timeless awareness of so many masters and wonderful people.